Hey, what's up guys? In this top 10 episode, we're diving into one of the icons from the action genre, Sylvester Stallone. I have 10 of my favorite Stallone hits ready to go, so let's dive into it. Coming in at number 10 on this list, I have an often forgotten film from the Stallone collection, that being the gritty 1981 crime thriller Nighthawks, featuring a bearded Stallone as a cop who, along with his partner, played by Billy D. Williams, will have to try and catch a deadly European terrorist, played by Rutger Hauer, when he arrives in New York City. I would definitely say this is an underrated Stallone movie. He was coming off of Rocky II here, and his star was on the rise, but he hadn't yet peaked. Stallone in this one plays a much more grounded undercover cop, and I think it really does fit the tone of the story nicely. This is a subtly stylish, gritty crime thriller with a nostalgic 70s vibe and atmosphere to it. Billy D. Williams was great as Stallone's partner. Rutger Hauer admittedly does steal the show with a world-class performance as the villain. He was calm, cool, and maniacal as this international terrorist, and the game of cat and mouse between these guys all over New York is awesome to watch. The story, I think, does move along nicely. The intensity continually ramps up, and it delivers a fantastic finale. And this movie isn't as big and loud as Stallone's future movies, but the ride it takes you on is still very much tension-filled. For my number 9 pick, I have an epic collaboration from the era, that being 1989's Tango and Cash, with Stallone starring alongside another action star from the era, Kurt Russell. In this one, Stallone and Russell form an odd couple alliance to stop an evil crime lord played perfectly by the legendary Jack Palance.
Where's he now? Where's the governor?
The desert, Rockaway Airfield.
Think he's telling the truth?
I don't know, but it's not raining, and he's standing in a puddle.
Disgusting.
I would say this movie is 100% carried by the star power of Stallone and Russell. The story itself is pretty dumb. It's loaded with a lot of plot holes and continuity issues and gaps in logic, but Stallone and Russell paired extremely nicely here. I would say like a nice peanut butter and jelly. There's just a charming authenticity to their banter. It's a great time to watch. I would kind of say this movie is part prison movie, part buddy comedy, and overall just a textbook 80s actioner. Jack Palance comes in to deliver a comically vile villain with his crew of 80s henchmen. It delivers a young, dancing Terry Hatcher, and yeah, even if it all feels like empty calories, the frequent and explosive action is a delight. I laughed at all of the jokes and dumb innuendo as a kid. I laugh at probably a few of these jokes still as an adult, yet the lighthearted adventure always feels like a great time, as if this is almost like an unintentional parody of just the 80s action genre as a whole. Up next for my number 8 pick is a movie that I probably like a lot more than most, and that would be 1995's Assassins. Here, Stallone co-stars with Antonio Banderas. They play a couple hitmen who find their paths routinely crossing while executing contracts, which naturally pits them against one another.
Los clavos de Cristo.
I think this is a fun, tension-filled step into the world of international contract killers. Antonio Banderas was blowing up in the States during the time of this movie's run, and sharing this film with Stallone certainly did help. I think he certainly was awesome as the sexy and eccentric young killer on the rise, which I definitely think paired nicely with Stallone's older, more calculated and experienced character. It's really a game of moves and counter moves between Banderas and Stallone throughout the runtime, and with great direction from Richard Donner, I think you really can feel the suspense of each moment. Julianne Moore comes in with a great performance to really balance the cast nicely, and the action comes in a charming variety as well to kind of keep it fresh and unpredictable. It's very much adrenaline-filled at times, it's stealthy and unnerving during others, it's absolutely explosive when it needs to, and it's just a suspenseful roller coaster of fun, topped with just a nicely layered storyline that can easily intrigue to kind of give weight and ramifications to all the action. Moving on to my number 7 pick, I have Stallone's prison movie from 1989, that being Lock Up. Prison flicks were a staple of 80s and 90s cinema, and here Stallone must survive the wrath of a sadistic warden played to perfection by Donald Sutherland.
This is hell. I'm going to give you the guided tour.
I would say this is another one of Stallone's underrated movies. It's got plenty of action with escape sequences and gritty prison fights, but it doesn't just rely on the action, the dramatic layering, and I would say the character motivation really is the focus. Stallone's character is about to be released, but instead he's transferred out to this max security facility ruled by a vile warden from his past, and I mean, you can instantly connect with Stallone here and all the helplessness that he's feeling, and Sutherland as the sadistic warden with a grudge was absolutely perfect. I think this movie has a great hero-villain combo, and I think it carries the movie very effectively. It's a blend of storytelling, character performances, and action, and I think the movie holds up well, but I mean, as with any 80s Stallone movie, the action is frequent, and I think it definitely delivers great doses of it. The story layering and the game of cat and mouse between Stallone and Sutherland kind of give it weight, so while this movie looks like a typical actioner from the era, I would kind of contend that it's a little bit more than that. Coming in at number 6, I picked a pop culture classic from the 80s, Rocky IV. Here Stallone's Balboa takes on the massive Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, in Russia on Christmas after this deadly fighter kills Creed in an exhibition match. No, I wouldn't sit here and tell you that this is a critically good movie, but I absolutely love it as it is. I grew up watching this movie. It's essentially a string of montages, and they are classic 80s from top to bottom, and this may be a bit of a cheesy plotline and a little bit generic, but I mean, isn't that really why it works? The tropes in this one were extremely simple. It's country versus country, David versus Goliath, and the tale of revenge, all topped with boxing and Sylvester Stallone at the height of his box office supremacy. And this one also had Dolph Lundgren, who is one of the greatest villains in film history from the 80s as Drago. The training montages are awesome. The music is as well. The in-ring boxing is just adrenaline pumping and climactic. Plus, the loss of Apollo Creed is just the textbook definition of melodrama that is so effective it draws a tear in my eye every time I see him hit the canvas. We're at the middle of my list, and coming in at number 5, I picked Demolition Man. Here, Stallone shares the screen with Wesley Snipes, who played the eccentric villain to Stallone's tough-as-nails cop, and the two of these guys are going to battle it out in the ultra-gentrified future after having been frozen for their crimes years earlier. The plot is 100% ridiculous, but oddly enough, that's kind of why it's an amazing movie.
Last time, Phoenix. Where are the hostages?
To hell with the hostages! This is between you and me.
This was easily an epic collaboration for me as a kid. Stallone and Snipes were two of my favorite actors in the 90s, and seeing them face off against one another was absolutely amazing. It's just a fun, futuristic, sci-fi action comedy, and it just blended all the genres together extremely well. The action is large scale and filled with a lot of explosive tension, and I think the comedic bits land nicely from the ideas of the future to the banter between the dialogue. There's just a lot of places to find amusement in this one. I think Stallone is charming as this fish out of water cop, but still every bit the action hero, and I would also kind of say this is probably, I would say, his most effective comedic performance. I think Sandra Bullock also shines in this one as the young cop. Dennis Leary lands some moments of humor as well, and Snipes was awesome as the villain. I would say some could argue that he steals the show a bit with his vibrantly deranged performance, but regardless of that, he and Stallone are an entertaining 1-2 punch when battling it out in the future. For my number 4 pick, I have what is easily considered Stallone's most memorable and iconic movie, that of course being 1976's Rocky, also written by Stallone and co-starring the great Talia Shire, Burt Young, and of course Carl Weathers.
What about my prime, Nick? At least you had a prime. I ain't had no prime, I ain't had nothing.
I would say this is probably Stallone's most iconic film overall. It's also the ultimate story of the underdog and never giving up, and to this day, it's probably still Stallone's most inspired, if not best performance overall. I mean, anytime you need some inspiration, this is a go-to movie to watch. Rocky becoming a pro boxer and falling in love is a heartwarming tale. The small budget gives the movie a gritty authenticity that provides it a nice real-life vibe that I always enjoy watching. acting, and Stallone was very raw here. Talia Shire was as well, but I think that's why they were awesome in these characters, and their acting imperfections here actually made them kind of feel more like genuine, relatable people. And I mean, the final showdown with Apollo Creed is awesome. It still holds up great, and this movie also delivered the holy grail of training montages, because if Rocky running through Philly to his iconic theme song doesn't make you feel like you can take on the world, I don't think anything can. With that said, we've reached my 3 top films, and coming in at number 3, I have arguably Stallone's best movie of the 90s. That would be Cliffhanger, directed by Rennie Harlin. Here, Stallone plays a mountain climbing forest ranger that gets roped up with his buddy Hal, played by Michael Rooker, into escorting a crew of criminals led by John Lithgow through the mountains in search for some cash after a heist gone wrong. This is definitely one of the ultimate action thrillers of the 90s in my opinion. The direction and cinematography were impeccable. The lack of digital effects, I think, are what enabled this movie to stand the test of time, because the action is absolutely nail-biting and visually impressive from start to finish. I think the opening sequence is iconic, and this movie can easily pull you out onto the mountain edges as adventures ensue. Stallone and Rooker's game of cat and mouse with these villains all over the mountains is an awesome watch. Stallone in this one is larger than life, but really his redemption story arc puts you right in his corner rooting for him, and John Lithgow was awesome as the vicious bad guy. I think he was charismatic, and Lithgow's controlled insanity was perfect for this character. The story is fast-paced, and the tension and suspense never let up, and this is just one of those movies that can pull you into it no matter how many times you've seen it. Moving on to my number 2 pick, I have the movie that really introduced me to Stallone and action movies, Rambo First Blood Part 2, directed by George P. Cosmatos, with Stallone returning as Green Beret John Rambo, who's going to, in this mission, venture back into the jungles of Vietnam to rescue some POWs. He runs into trouble and proceeds to blow up half the country to survive. Now, don't get me wrong, I definitely think First Blood is one of Stallone's better films overall, but Rambo 2 just holds a place in my heart. I watched it countless times as a kid. I think this movie is the epitome of the 80s action genre. The on-location shoot pulls you out into the jungles with Rambo, and it's a wildly intense ride. I think the action holds up great with tense gunplay, stealth kills, and just endless explosions. It's really just the classic one-man army tale, and Stallone was perfect for this role. I think it delivers some classic lines from the 80s as well, and while it may not have that dramatic punch of First Blood, I do think the action is a nice replacement. I mean, 1985 was Stallone's year at the box office, and he was larger than life in this role. I mean, growing up, I lived in Washington. I would watch this movie and then always venture out into the woods for my own solo missions, and every time I watch this movie as an adult, it always takes me back to those times. And coming in at number 1, a movie that may be a surprise choice to many of you, but I picked the action thriller Cobra from 1986. Here, Stallone plays Marion Cobretti, a detective in LA's zombie squad who sets out to stop a vicious serial killer and his cult of followers who are hunting a witness played by Stallone's wife at the time, Brigitte Nielsen.
I'm a hero of the new world.
Your disease, and I'm the cure.
This is certainly another instance where, despite the movie not being critically sound, I still happen to love it. This was another movie I grew up watching countless times as a kid. It's a tightly paced action movie that has a dark psychological thriller atmosphere to it. Brian Thompson was awesome as the sadistic Night Stalker. He truly terrified me as a kid, and Stallone in this movie, despite kind of feeling like a parody of the 80s movie detective, was fantastic. He has a seriousness but also a self-awareness to his portrayal of Marion Cobretti. His persona is almost unintentionally comical, yet the appeal to him is undeniable. Stallone's dispensing one cheesy line after another, and it's just 80s movie greatness. The opening scene in the grocery store never fails to set the mood. The second act car chase is just a charming throwback to practical stunt work of the 80s. It's got a awesome 80s LA vibe to it, and when the finale really kicks in, the body count skyrockets. Stallone is all over the place in this one, he's riding in the back of a truck, mowing down one bad guy after another, and while it's all a bit simplistic story-wise, the non-stop action and solid moments of suspense make it a film I always head to when wanting a quick dose of 80s Stallone. And that's my list of top 10 favorite Sylvester Stallone films. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching as always, and make sure to let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite movies are from the Stallone library.